Good morning, and welcome to The Mental Breakdown. I'm Dr. Bernie Wilkinson.
I'm Dr. Richard Marshall.
And it's Monday. Welcome to Monday.
Suddenly it's Monday.
Monday, January 9th, 2017.
Colleges are back in session.
I will happily say that I haven't made this 16 for 17 mistake yet. Not at all.
For the new year.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, part of that is because my computer automatically fills in the date when I get it started, so that's really helped.
Right.
But otherwise, I haven't said 2016.
You know, for anybody over 14 or 15, nobody, even you, are over 15. It seems like the millennium from to 2000 was not that long ago.
Right.
In a couple of years, it'll be 20 years. It happened 17 years ago.
Right.
Doesn't seem that long, does it?
No.
Time flies.
It does.
When you're past 30, time starts to go by fast.
That's because you're having fun. So, well, today we're going to talk about. So this week is going to be it's sort of a hodgepodge week. We have topics for the topics for this week are going to be a little bit varied, but it's because of information that we've received from other people, some things that have been in the news, some things that have been asked of us. And so we're going to sort of focus this week on a variety of things. And today we're going to talk for just a little bit about something in response to some events from the end of last week that occurred here in Florida, just about maybe 3 hours from where we're sitting right now.
A couple of hours away, right?
Yeah. So I think it was last Friday. There was the end of last week. There was a shooting in a Fort Lauderdale airport. And I believe 5 people were killed, and 6 or 7 people were injured. Right. And we wanted to talk about it because there was also an article, a really interesting article, that talked about the impact of traumatic events and fear, not necessarily on the person that experienced it, him or herself, the experience, somebody that was injured or something like that, but actually bystanders, people who witnessed what happened. And it's really important because, when we think about, and as I'm saying this, I realize how unbelievable it is to even say something like this. But, 5 people were killed, 6 people were injured. Right. So we have an incident involving, 11 injuries, at least, physical injuries. And when we think about that in the scheme of some of the other horrific events that, the one in Orlando that happened last year that, I think there was 50 people killed. It seems a smaller scale, but what's really important to consider, and the reason that we're going to talk about it today, is because those were 11 people that were physically injured, but anyone that was in the airport at the time could potentially suffer from something we call Posttraumatic Stress Disorder, PTSD. Right. And I think that we often associate PTSD with military veterans. We associate it with people who were the victims of different kinds of abuse and things like that. But an event like what happened last week could absolutely create and elicit a PTSD type of response in somebody, even if they were just in the airport and were in the area when it happened.
That's right. We know that we know what it does. We know what trauma, the experience of trauma, does to victims.
Right.
Okay. But now we're talking about what it does to observers.
Right.
Of aggressive acts or violent acts. Right?
Absolutely.
So, and of course, that's what we know from the soldiers too, because the soldiers who come, not just men now, but soldiers who come back from war zones, they have watched, they have witnessed. They may not have been physically injured,
right,
but they were in the vicinity and watched other people get injured. And what this article says is that may have, that may serve to have the same effect as being a victim
Right.
of one of these violent crimes.
Yeah.
So you think of the Boston, bombing
Right.
a few years ago at the Boston Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
All those people who were close to the explosions,
Yeah, absolutely.
all could have been affected by this.
Well, it expands. Interestingly, it expands even farther because we have some accounts of PTSD symptoms for people who, remember back, we were talking about that how long ago the turn of the millennium was,
right.
but September 11th in 2001, many people have been traumatized by that simply by seeing the videos. People who weren't even there, if we remember back in those days, it was repeatedly aired, the explosions, the planes hitting the buildings. Everything was repeatedly shown over and over and over again, and a lot of people from all over the country have been affected from that.
I don't think anybody could ever remember I don't think you'll ever forget the planes hitting the buildings, but also the buildings slowly crumbling to the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't say that I had PTSD from that experience from a psychological perspective. I mean, certainly it affected me and it's traumatic and everything. But I know too that whenever I see a large passenger plane banking and turning, you immediately go to that place.
Right.
But you were talking about soldiers who weren't necessarily in the combat itself, but kind of witnessed things happening. Interestingly, some people are publishing some research that looks at those soldiers and individuals who are flying the drones that are, bombing different places and everything.
They're not physically present.
They may be miles and miles away.
Right.
But because of their actions, we see it sometimes in commanders where the commanders are sending people out to battle. They're not there physically. They don't even necessarily see it happening, but they know that they are responsible for sending these people out. So PTSD is much more pervasive and prevalent than we usually think it is, because we tend to have such a restricted view of it.
And this article that was about the brain changes that occur in PTSD.
Right.
And that, I think, is the remarkable feature of this study, is that we know that PTSD changes the brain.
Right.
That's we know that in victims or soldiers. But this article is saying it could change the brain in observers as well.
Absolutely.
What we don't know is how much is enough. How much do you need in order to have documented brain changes?
Right.
And the research simply isn't in on that.
Right.
We just don't know.
Yeah. So if you have, go ahead. You look like you had something important to say.
Well, I think of children who see violence and domestic violence.
Yeah.
Children who view domestic violence prior to age 3. You may not remember it because of infantile amnesia. But at what age, and that could have lifelong effects on their brain development.
Absolutely.
Is just observing domestic violence.
Right. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So it's imperative that if certainly if you've experienced trauma, but even if you've witnessed trauma, and interestingly, I'd like. It's interesting when we're interpreting the diagnostic criteria that's listed for PTSD, because it says experienced, exposed to, or were confronted with something that's life-threatening.
Yeah, it doesn't have to happen to you directly.
Right. And that's what I always work to teach my students, is that when that piece that says confronted with information about it, then now we're talking about. Sometimes we could just be told about something and it could trigger a response. Some of our brains are much more susceptible to it than others. Some things that we know is that if you do have a history of trauma, you are much more susceptible to it than someone who hasn't ever been exposed to trauma. Right.
And what we mentioned earlier is how much is enough, and it probably varies from individual to one of the things we know is that there were studies done with children who had early onset bipolar disorder. And when they were shown violent pictures, accidents and traumatic episodes, their brains became much more active than the brains of children who didn't have that diagnosis. So there are individual differences and variations. So if these things trouble you, watching these events trouble you. It may be that you're a little more sensitive to it for some reason.
Yeah.
So be cautious.
Yeah. So if you've been exposed to something, if you experience something directly, or if you've learned about something and you are ruminating over it, if you can't stop thinking about it, if you keep feeling triggered by thoughts of it, or by things that are happening around you that make you kind of again trigger those thoughts, maybe good to see a therapist or to talk to a professional who's going to be able to help you work through that and help you find ways to cope with those so that you can sort of process it in a healthy way and move forward.
Right, because I think a lot of people are probably thinking, well, I'm weak, or it's a sign of weakness, or I shouldn't be, nobody else is bothered by this the way I am. That's okay.
Yeah. Because
each of us can be bothered by a different amount. Right. So don't underestimate. If you're really troubled by something, doesn't matter what it is, talk to somebody about it. It may be that you're just a little, there are people who cannot watch scary movies because it has too profound, and other people laugh and enjoy it and they realize it's fiction. Right. But others cannot watch them. Right. So
we can't help. Often we can't help the way that our brain responds to that stuff.
That's right.
And I mean, it is
an individual brain response.
And we can maybe one day we'll get into the brain chemistry and functioning behind this. But your brain responds to this before you really even realize that you're responding to it.
That's right. That's right. It's that's why it's called a visceral response. Your insides respond before you name it.
Yeah. So. When you the example I always use is that when you're in the woods, you're running before you know that there's a bear.
That's right.
You are running and you're getting away before you realize that the bear is there.
And you're running in a different direction. Your body knows what to do.
That's right. So. But it doesn't process details as easily. So that's why, like in scary movies, we always joke about, of course, whenever in a scary movie somebody's falling, and it's like, why didn't she just run?
Don't go in that room.
In reality, you're not going to make good decisions, and you're not going to see that stump there that you're going to trip over. That stuff is going to happen.
But it really is. It amazes me because there are people who love scary movies because it arouses them.
Right.
And there are others who can't watch them because it arouses them. So pay attention to your brain.
That's right.
Listen to it.
So all of that to say that your brain responds the way that your brain responds. You don't necessarily have control over that. So if you're responding to something and if you're experiencing some distress, make sure that you get some help and talk to somebody so that you can build some skills to cope with it.
And don't be embarrassed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, that is it for today. Again, we got a packed week scheduled and ready for you. And I'm going to go ahead and tease it.
No.
We have a really great, exciting announcement that I'm saving everything up for Friday.
Till Friday.
But it's going to be really exciting.
No impulse control.
No, not at all. It's exciting. Right. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
Good day.
Stay happy and healthy. And we'll see you in the morning.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.